forward to the cloud. And I'm going to hand it over to Jessica. Thank you for joining us today, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk with everyone today about my favorite topic, open pedagogy, and really engaging students in OER. We talk a lot about OER, and in this, if you checked out some of the other sessions, I'm sure you got a great overview. I'm really going to focus today on open pedagogy. And I joke that open pedagogy is like the hippie part of teaching. You get to be open, you get to be free, you get to be wild, and you get to work with students. So I hope by the end of today, or the session, you'll maybe walk away with some ideas of why you should turn to your students for input within your courses before, during, and even after you're teaching your classes. And I think this is important because we're always trying to improve. We're always trying to work towards changing our courses to fit with our learners. We've heard a lot about student-centered learning. And so this is another way to achieve that. Some housekeeping things to just be aware of. I love when people back channel, so feel free to use the chat and back channel any sort of comments, questions, thoughts. As I present, I'm always looking at that, seeing what you have to say. Feel free to challenge anything I say, and even add maybe some of your own experiences, and we'll have some time to talk through some of those experiences. So don't be scared to add to this. I think it just enriches some of that conversation. So we're going to first talk a little bit about open pedagogy practices. We'll then talk a little bit about how and when to do this, and then ideas and lessons learned from using this kind of teaching practice. So just so we're on the same page, this definition is from Robin DeRosa. Robin DeRosa is amazing. If you haven't had the opportunity to check out her content or to see her even in person, she's truly inspiring. But really, it talks about learning, teaching, technology, and even social justice when we talk about open pedagogy. And this is why I say open pedagogy and OER is kind of the hippie part of teaching. And so when we're thinking about this, always thinking about that conversation piece with each other to inform the development of educational practices and structures. Now, that doesn't just mean you and your colleagues, that means you and your students. We tend to have a very hierarchical structure within education. We tend to have that sage on the stage and students who are supposed to listen and absorb. We now know that that maybe isn't the best way to do things, but instead creating more of an equal platform. And that allows students to feel more engaged, supported, and maybe even help you develop the course even better than what you have come up with. But what it's not, I often hear people talk about open pedagogy as like this magical unicorn that runs around and solves all problems. It is not a magical panacea. Maybe it is a unicorn in your mind, but it does begin to start to think about some of the challenges with cost and access. But by no means is it a magic wand that's going to save us all from the current crises facing higher ed. So just to be aware of that as we move through this presentation. So opening up to these practices is key. Collaborating with students is such an amazing experience, and you do this in your classes already. But viewing students as collaborators changes that viewpoint from the sage on the stage to entering in a partnership. Now, we've heard some great presentations about how to create a syllabus that Chris Price gave a great presentation yesterday about how to change your syllabus so it's not a contract, but instead having students wanting to be part of this and read this document. Well, students like when they're part of the planning process, part of the conversation. And I think it's important to give students somewhat of an equal say in your classroom. And I mean, I don't let students run things because we all know what would happen there. We don't need to do any homework. We just all know everything. But instead, really help them to learn some of that critical thinking skills and those decision-making skills. Yeah, all the cake for dinner. And one thing that I think is really important and often forgotten in some of what we do is transparency. So what do I mean by transparency? I like to tell students why I do what I do. So before we start with a class, I teach them about what a learning objective is. Why do I write these darn learning objectives every single time? Why is it the second slide they see every time they come to class? Why is this important? Why are we writing a paper? Why do we have to use APA style? And more importantly, how what they're learning and why we do the things we do are going to impact them in their future. That transparency can go into helping your students engage with the content. No one likes to write a 5-page paper. All of you out there who are doing your summer writing, we all feel the same. But it's important for our job, our promotion. The same thing is for students. I always tell students, it's important for you to learn how to write, because although you do everything in small text characters, one day you will have to write a report if you're in public health. So transparency is something you're going to see kind of weave throughout this, and the importance of collaboration is letting your students into some of those teaching secrets, some of your pedagogical practices, and even describing some of those best practices so that students can continue to advocate for other classes to use some of these techniques or evidence-based practices. So I want to take some time and I want to move into breakout rooms. I'd like you to have a conversation with your colleagues here. In what ways do you currently collaborate with students? And this can be, you know, I talk to them after class, or maybe you are using some of these practices already. I'm really interested to know what you have to say. So Jamie's going to move you into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. And when we come back, I'd love for you to report out on what you currently use, and maybe if you got any tips or tricks from others in this group.
All right, I'm going to open the rooms. Please feel free to join them. I see people are doing so already. Jessica, if you want, I can broadcast the message of what they're supposed to be considering so that they have that. What would you like me to type to them?
In what ways?
Oh, there it is, right in front of me.
Yes.
Sorry.
No problem. Great. So please head to your breakout rooms to have a bit of a conversation on this.
I'm going to move you to room 1.
I sometimes feel like breakout rooms are mean in the morning.
Yeah, we can see that we have some rooms that are full and then another couple that are like, meh.
Oh, it happens. Last semester, I taught a 9:30 a.m. class, and I would start off with breakout rooms, and students would just be like, "This is so hard." Like, yeah, it is. But if not, you guys sit there, just stare at me. So.
All right, I'm I'm trying to move people around for those that are in an empty room.
Great.
There we go. All right, I think we have most people with at least 2. Let's assign you to room 7, assign to room. So if you're just joining, we're doing breakout rooms, and I'm gonna send you, I've invited everybody to do a room. You can, into a room, you can click join. There we go. I think we got most everybody into rooms now.
Great. We'll give them about 3-4 minutes.
Tony's in the room with just one other person, but he can handle that, I think.
Yeah.
How long do you want the rooms?
We'll give them another 3 minutes or so. Just, I mean, tell them 2 minutes, and then usually it takes 1 minute to bring everyone back.
Yeah, when I close all the rooms, it'll give them a 60-second, so. Hi, Sarah. I see you just joined. I'm not going to assign you to a breakout room because I'm just going to pull you back in 60 seconds. All right. All right, I'm going to give them a 60-second warning. Jessica,
Great.
is that all right?
Perfect. So as you're rejoining from your breakout rooms, I hope you had a nice conversation about collaboration. If you want to type it in the chat, what you talked about, that'd be amazing. If you want to unmute, I'm happy for you to do that also.
All right, they're going to close in 10 seconds.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm interested to know, what sort of collaboration did you discuss in your group? You can feel free to either unmute or type it in the chat.
Hey everybody, this is Paula. In our group, we talked about meeting and having interviews with students. We talked about allowing the students to give input in terms of deadlines and things like that. And we also talked about doing a questionnaire prior to the start of class. I'm teaching an online class hybrid on Zoom, and that's one of the things that I do. I'm teaching a summer course, and the students have already responded to my questionnaire. So I've been using that in my planning of the course.
That's awesome. Those are great ideas. Thank you for sharing. What did other groups discuss?
In our group, we had also the kind of pre-survey of topics, and getting a sense of background came up. I thought that was a really cool idea. And then another was, like, say, with things like internships, they get to select the project and how they want to apply any kind of set readings that are provided in the course. And then there's free weeks that have been devoted that allow the students to select kind of what they want to cover. And then one thing that I do is is like week 4 of class, do a kind of a survey just to get a sense of how students are feeling about the class, any changes, and then after that announce, here's what I saw, and here are the changes I will make. And I did this last time make some changes because, at UB, we didn't have any spring break or days off. And so I did create some mental health days and things in response, because they were, even at week 4, they were looking ahead and very anxious about stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, those are all fantastic ways to think about collaborating. It sounds like a lot of choice too, which is excellent to hear. Any others want to share?
Well, in our group, hello everyone. So in our group, we had a very interesting discussion. One of us was sharing the information about the activity or assignment she is giving to her students related to responding to COVID-19 and disruption, which made it more authentic, I can say, writing for the students, a kind of experience for the students. We talked about discussion board, we talked about talking about the goals the students have accomplished so far and the goals they have for the coming weeks. These are all the topics we talked in our group.
Oh,
Thank you.
these are such great ideas. I love them. It sounds like a lot of you are using some feedback on some of the pre-work, sometimes during. And I love this. It's a great way to learn how to teach from people who had sort of seen it all. So getting a lot of that feedback from the students is just a great way to understand where they are. I oftentimes start off class by saying, what's going on? Give me thumbs up, moderate, or thumbs down, and then kind of going from there. So that's fantastic. Anyone else? These are great ideas.
Sure. In our group, Allison came in late, but she was explaining, which sounded really interesting, that she has her students help her build the syllabus. So I don't want to speak for her. If she could talk a little bit more about that, I thought that was a very, very innovative idea.
Maureen, were you talking about me, Leslie?
I'm sorry, Leslie. I'm sorry, I said it wrong, but I apologize.
No problem, Maureen. Yeah, I like to include my students in the syllabi development, knowing that there are critical elements that they can't change or really take part in, but regarding the culture of the classroom, regarding the expectations of the classroom, regarding the different assignments that will help us meet the learning objectives, I think choice is a really big component in creating that buy-in and letting them know that I'm really invested in making sure that they get out what they hope to get from the class. So that's just been a really great way to involve them and get them engaged and get them working with one another too. Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we'll talk about some of these and maybe some more ideas for you to think about in collaborating with your students. So thank you all for sharing. These are great ideas. I love it when you get to go to a session and hear from other people that are doing these awesome things. I always learn something new in my own presentation. So thank you for being part of that. So the first part about being more open with your students is really supporting them and encouraging them. Like we said, academia has always been structured in kind of this power dynamic, but it doesn't often encourage students to speak up. And so by opening and creating more of an open environment for your students, you are encouraging them to take time to speak up, to question things. How often are they enabled to say, well, what does that mean? Or why do we do that, right? And I love when students question some of the structural components. I sometimes don't have an answer, like, why do we have to go all year or all semester? Why don't we have a break? I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll try to figure it out, right? And having those moments where you can be completely honest with them really sets the stage for this. I'm a professor in public health, and so my area is all about questioning democracy and creating a supportive environment. I want to make sure that as public health professionals, they're going to be able to go out and say, like, why don't we have a law protecting people? Or we should really put funding here versus there. And so I think that starts in the classroom, and it starts by setting up this environment that supports them. And this is a whole nother presentation on caring, but caring is key. And as Leslie and others mentioned, right, having choice, setting that stage for what your students are going to get. I think it's all about being authentic. And if you're not quite there to give the reins over to students or to share those reins, don't do it, right? You have to be at this place in order to feel comfortable in allowing students some of this choice. So before a class starts, I think it's so important to really include students. So we heard some examples of this. Course planning. This is one of the questions that I include in one of my surveys that I give to students before the start of the semester. And this question, what do you think is a reasonable policy for attendance? And if I'm interested to know, can anyone guess what students picked the majority of the time here? You must log in within 3 minutes. You need to participate in each class and earn 1 free absence. Okay, got some votes on free absence here. And this was a choose all that apply. So they could choose multiple. It's interesting, they did choose the free absence, but they also liked that people had to log in within the first 3 minutes of the course, which I thought they would never go for, right? But that's what we did. And actually, by having that policy and talking about that policy as a group and sharing these results with students, I hardly had anyone log in late for this course, which is amazing, right? Imagine that. So having students set some of these policies and helping you plan can really support them actually participating and be active in following some of these policies. Expectations. So I like to, sense of shared responsibility in this, I think is key. Setting expectations, right? And that's something that I love to start class with. I love to, on the first day of class, after kind of talking about who I am, I always ask students, what do you hate about courses? What is the least favorite thing about a course? They usually, if it's, in person, I'll give them all a marker to go up on their board and write what they hate. They hate that a professor does. Yeah, they always write exams. It's true. I don't give exams, so it's fine. I always tell them that's a bonus of my courses, but they don't know that's part of my philosophy yet. But I also think it's important that you understand some of what they have been through, per se. Everyone on this call has had a really bad instructor at some point in their life. And you can name off all the things that you don't like. It's harder sometimes to figure out what you like in a course. And so by starting with what you don't like, I talk through. And some of the things that they don't like, we have to keep, right? Like, yes, we have to do work in this class. Sorry, this is college. Sometimes we do things that are hard. But other times it is, I can understand why you wouldn't want an instructor who doesn't put readings up in a timely manner. Yeah. And so it's important that we, talk through those things. That goes back to some of the transparency. And then setting those expectations where everyone can kind of agree of like, yeah, let's do that. Let's all come to class on time. Wouldn't that be nice? I even sometimes explain to students why, least like versus hate. That's a good choice in words. I like that. And so another thing that's important, and some of you have mentioned, is assessments, right? When you're creating this course, how do you set up your assessments? Do you allow your students to choose? Is there choice? Is it do this or do that? Do they want choice? In some classes, students get a little paralyzed by choice, especially when you don't fully describe all of those choices. For example, one of my classes, I allow students to either write a paper, create a PowerPoint with voiceover, write a video, produce a video, a short video, or they can, gosh, I'm forgetting my last one. Let's just say there's 3. There's more than 3, but in that, most students choose to write a paper. And the reason why is they're very comfortable with that. They know the expectations for a paper. Although all of the other choices have clearly laid out expectations, sometimes they're not used to that. And so slowly easing students into some of this choice around assessments, and even having them build some of your assessments as assignments. The reason I like student-built assignments for other students is that they write in a way which is key for other students to understand. When a student writes an assignment for another student, I don't often use it in that same semester. I use it in the subsequent semester, but it's a great way to create some case studies, to build out content, and students love that what they've built is going to go to the next semester. I think another thing that in our more online learning environment or hybrid environment, delivery method is something that you should definitely talk about with students. So next semester, I'm planning on doing a flipped classroom approach. Students aren't used to a flipped classroom approach in my program. So we have to have some conversation about that. What does that mean? What are those expectations? And what do they expect from me in order to support them during that? In an online environment, last semester, it was interesting because students often like asynchronous classes. They like to just kind of do it on their own. But some students really wanted to engage with each other instead of just do a discussion board. So about the second weekend, I asked everyone, would you like some options here? Would you like to, instead of do a discussion board, you can actually come to class and discuss for 25 minutes once a week? And half the class did that, and half the class chose to stay with the asynchronous discussion. And that was great because they could choose students who had stronger writing abilities, sometimes chose the discussion board, but they could also flip-flop, especially when we had heated topics. This was a course on incarceration and public health, so they often wanted to come and discuss this. So these are all examples of how you can really engage students before a class starts. Now, during a class, I think it's really important to continue that check-in. So David mentioned that he did like a 4-week check-in. I do this a lot at the start of class. Hey, could you tell me how everyone, are you feeling confident about this sort of writing that we're doing? How confident are you in your ability to, perform this task? Are my instructions clear? These are quick questions that you could throw as in a Zoom chat, or I do my thumbs up, kind of unscientific measure a lot in in-person classes. Now, students often overrate their confidence, but it's still a gauge of where you're at and where they are. If students are often not that confident in APA style in my courses, they usually land at somewhat confident, which really means not very confident. And so we end up taking some more time in discussing that. I also ask them a lot, tell me what doesn't make sense about this. Instead of saying, does this make sense to everyone? I like them to pull out those things that are unclear. So we do a lot of evaluating, we do a lot of check-in. I try to be very transparent in everything that I do. So we have a lot of talks. Yeah, the rewording is really supportive in that way. Because if you ask, do you get it? Right? Everyone's like, when in fact, many don't. Oftentimes, my directions, I think, are crystal clear. Everything is covered. It shows them, what the overview of the assignment, it tells them how the learning objectives align. It tells them what they're expected to do and by when, and even gives examples. Still, with those, sometimes students don't understand what I'm trying to convey. And so I provide instructions in a few different forms. I provide a written form of instruction, and I also make a video form of instruction, and I also provide an example. And sometimes all three of those are still a little bit confusing. And so we talk about them every class before an assignment is due. This is where we have a lot of those discussions. And when I talk about we have a lot of discussions, these are not like 3-hour discussions. These are short check-ins, 2 to 3 minutes. We can all use those 2 to 3 minutes. And guess what? It cuts down on the amount of emails that you get. So having those, and when a student doesn't understand, usually someone else steps in to help support them, which is another way of building community. And so all of this goes into some of these best practices. Now, after a course, end of course evals are great sometimes if the questions that you're asking provide the input. Now, we've all seen that some of our evaluations are, a little, doesn't provide a lot of actionable comments. So I always like to add, if you have the opportunity to add some qualitative questions, that's key. I often do a second assessment with students where they can earn some, maybe extra credit points to give me a little bit of a summary about what they learned and what they wish they knew at the beginning of the class. I use that information for my next class, right? And I use it for my revisions. I think getting that information from students love to hear from other students. So by saying, read the book written by, last year's students, that's important. And hopefully students are taking that to heart when they're in the course. I always like to do a course wrap up, and this provides an opportunity to really talk through what went well, what didn't go well. And my students are brutally honest. Sometimes I have to walk away and be like, oh gosh, you guys are too honest. This open stuff is really working. But truthfully, that's what I want, right? I want them to be comfortable coming up to me and saying, that last activity, I don't think I got out of it what you're trying to get me to understand. And to me, that's so insightful, right? One, they're confident students to be able to talk to me. Two, they're comfortable saying not just positive things to me. And three, they give me a lot of information about how to continue to make changes. I personally don't use exit interviews with students, but I know a lot of faculty do, where you sit down with your students and kind of have one-on-one interviews. It's another great way to discuss. If I'm testing out a new assessment, I have my students do some reflection on that assessment to see if I'm going to keep it. And if you're lucky enough to have student assistants or teaching assistants, I love their insight. They are so great because they're sitting there alongside you. They know what you really expect, and they can often tell if students are coming to them with a lot of questions and can provide you some of that insight. The students will often tell them some of the things that they may not feel comfortable telling you. So it's another reason why checking in with your student assistants, even during your class, is key. Okay, I went through a lot of things there. So let's take a moment and just kind of, if you have any comments, questions, thoughts. Leslie added something to the chat. Oh, love it. Having students write a letter to other students. That's perfect. I'm interested, is there anything that we kind of talked about here that you're like, I might implement that? Anyone going to be brave and try one of these techniques? Yeah, I like getting your students into the attendance policy is a nice way to do some of those supporting them in that. Yeah, the course schedule is a great way. I even talked to them some about like, how does the class look for you? When you come to class, what are you kind of thinking that we should do in the first 5 minutes? How should the last 5 minutes be spent? Yeah, the in-person discussion is always fun, and it's interesting to see how the class splits on that. Great. So how do you do some of these things? Well, I think check-ins are really key. You know, having some time to really check in with your students, whether that's that short Zoom poll, whether you're doing the thumbs up, thumbs down sort of things, how you can really question your students on how things are going. You have to feel confident to ask them those questions and create that environment that they're willing to answer, because sometimes they just want to make you feel good. They're very kind. Questioning, sometimes I add a question on a quiz that really doesn't count for anything. Or I will just ask them, you know, let's talk about this, and have them have a discussion. Small groups can be really powerful because the students will then kind of talk together like, yeah, that didn't quite work. Yeah, you're right, that didn't quite work. That was hard for me to understand, and have them kind of submit almost a short written paper. So it can be a really important thing. So all of these courses could really be applied to large classes. I typically teach courses that are about, my largest course I've ever taught was 400. My smallest was, I think 15, but I usually teach around 90 students at a time. And I use all of these techniques in the large courses. I use a tool called Top Hat to do a lot of my clicker kind of responses in class. I use it a lot for formative assessment. And so you can utilize some of these check-ins by that. Sometimes I just stop and I sit on the desk and we have a conversation, and having students kind of feeling comfortable to talk is something that I really want in my classroom. The tool is Top Hat. Top Hat is a, it's a fantastic tool. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk to you about it. I've used it for years. Yeah, I love the building rapport with your class, and you can do that rapport in those check-ins. These are a great way to do these verbally. You can also do written evaluations, and most people tend to do written, whether those are surveys, you know, formal evaluations, or reflections are very powerful. I add reflections at the end of every assignment to where they write a paragraph about what'd you learn, what did you enjoy, and what would you change, right? 3 sentences and you glean so much information, and it provides them an opportunity to really think about that. And what they could take away and apply. Public health is a very applied discipline, so this makes sense in my profession. So to do this, well, you have to be honest and open with your students and yourself. If you're not ready to do some of these techniques, be authentic and don't do them. You have to set the stage. So I have a very supportive classroom environment. I'm a very nurturing, coddling, sometimes too much hand-holding faculty member, but that's the environment that I want my students to learn in. That's what I care that they walk away with, and that they know I'm that person that they can come to, that they can talk to, and that I'm there for them, and that I love what I do. So when you set that stage, it provides you that rapport to begin some of this work. And start small. Maybe you just start with a few check-ins. Maybe you start with a question at the end of an assignment. Maybe you think about this for a semester or two before you dive in and change all your policies or allow students to engage with this. Maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, right? It's important to take all of these sort of techniques, and it may come into your life later. For me, it has been revolutionary. I love that my students are engaged and feel that they can provide different input and help build the course. So a word of caution. There's always a word of caution in these sort of things. If you're continuing to change things throughout the semester, for example, in the middle of the semester, all of my students became like little wilty flowers. And we decided that, we're going to take out an assignment. We're going to kind of pare it down, and we're going to change some due dates. We're going to give them a little bit more time. So we had that as a discussion. The students voted on it, but be sure that you're updating all of those documents so everyone's on the same page. So make sure your syllabi is updated, your course schedule is updated, all of your due dates are updated. So this can create a little bit more work for you if things are changing on the fly, because they become tiny little wilty flowers. One thing that I have in all my courses is a 2-day grace period. So whatever the due date is, they get 2 more days to turn it in. Let's be real, I'm still grading 2 days after they've already turned in the assignment. So that allows them some flexibility, but they need to be responsible. And if they need more time, they need to ask before the end of that 2-day grace period. They can't ask me at 9:49 that they need more time. They need to be kind of proactive. And so that's a really important thing for me, is knowing when you need more time. We can all move due dates. Unless it's an NIH deadline, things can get moved. And so I teach them a little bit about that. Yeah, the 2-day grace period has changed my life. You get less emails. Students are very happy about it because they can shift things if they miss a day. The 2-day grace period has just been, phenomenal. But again, document all of these things. Okay, so I have to talk a little bit about OER in this, because I love OER too. OER and open pedagogy go together hand in hand. I have been using OER for years now, and I use it to really build content with my students. So just like open pedagogy is building a structure, why not also build content? So I wrote a textbook with my students. This textbook is over 200 pages long, 19 chapters, and it is freely available on Lumen for anyone else to use. We update it every semester. So I was the only one in public health who had a textbook that included COVID, because we were building it during the time that COVID was out there. And so the beautiful part about having co-created materials is, one, students are writing for students. It's not some faculty member who has been in the field for 60 years and maybe has, the most knowledge that they can build on, but it's really them talking to each other. And so my textbook gets revised every semester. It's actually part of a student assignment. Students add to it, they revise it, they add questions, and this has been a really great way to have students co-create materials. Now, I do not advise creating a textbook for everyone. It's not for the faint at heart, but I actually got the idea from Robin DeRosa, who you definitely need to check out her materials if you want to go down the OER kind of direction. But you can do something a little bit different, right? You can maybe build some study guides with your students, having them each add a question to that study guide, having them help build assignments. These are all ways to co-create content. Now, I think the cool part about this is you can teach them about OER. So I always have a conversation. What does CC/BY/NC mean? What are these copyrights? And what are the 5 Rs? And so that they are a little bit more educated as they go out into the field. In public health, that's key, because we can reuse content from the CDC and other governmental agencies. And so they can learn what's the difference between remixing and plagiarism, right? These are important topics to discuss. So all of these are really, really great tools. What are the 5 Rs? Oh gosh, reuse, revise, remix. Tony, help me. We'll add those for you, Paula. And those are a great way to work through content with students. And getting started with building some of that content with your students is starting slow. I was young and maybe a little bit too adventurous to say, hey, I'm going to write a textbook with my students. And my chair said, what's your backup plan? I said, there is no backup plan. We're just going to do it. We did, thankfully. The students were willing to walk through fire to write this textbook. But that's because I had a lot of their buy-in. I told them that they're going to do something groundbreaking, and we even gave them a copy of their textbook, what was really sweet. But getting their buy-in is key. Being enthusiastic about doing hard things is important. Hard is hard. This is what I tell students all the time. But we learn through some of those challenges. A lot of these are translatable skills, and I think it's so important that we highlight some of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So for me, in public health, you're going to have to make documents, brochures, other information. You need to learn how to take that content and use some of these 5 R's to move towards building something that you can distribute. I also talk about how this meets the learning objectives in the course, how their chapter fits in with what we're doing, and how they're educating each other about the content. And it supports growth. I mean, the students in my course all get to put the citation to their chapter in their resume. How cool is that? They're published authors. And so we have, I've been doing this for 5 semesters now, and all of our students get to really, highlight that they've had this opportunity and that they've got to learn from and about each other through this. It's also cute because they can sometimes recognize names from students that came before them that are now in our master's program and say like, oh, that person's my TA. So it's a very nice kind of legacy project. Okay, so this all starts with you. It starts with you thinking about, does this fit? How does this work for what you're doing? And do you even want to go down this road? It's an exciting time to really work with your students. And it's a whole new semester that's coming up, whether you're starting in summer or fall. Is this something that you want to test out, try out, or maybe just dip your toe in the water? But I do like to point out, this needs to fit with your philosophy. Your teaching philosophy is something you should always come back and revisit multiple times. I revisit it every semester and see, is this truly encapsulating how I feel? I like to share my teaching philosophy with my students. It's not just a document, it's something that I live by. And so figuring out, does that fit in with your philosophy? Does open education and open educational practices really, are they exemplified? Is this something that's authentic to you? And I keep coming back to the word authentic because I think that's key. And so figuring out how that works with what you do, where you are, and maybe it's something you put in that notebook of future, and that's fine too. So with that, I wanted to have some time for some conversation. I'm interested to know, did we convince anyone? Guys are like, it's 11 o'clock in the morning in June. I'll think about this in August. A little apprehensive of how to do it in your classes. I think it's good to be honest that it can be very scary to try something new. And I think it's that start slow. Think about, maybe you're going to just ask a pre-survey, right? How are you going to start, just understanding who your students are? It is scary when you're giving up control, but remember, you're not giving it up. You're a collaborator in this. So you're not letting the horses run free. You're working with them. And so really owning that and telling them that you're scared, I think is important, right? Like I always walk into class and I say, I've been teaching for a while and I love teaching, but something's going to come up and you're going to give me a new problem. And sometimes it's going to be scary, but we're going to work through it together, right? So I tell students if I've never done something before, I'm very honest about that. And they really appreciate that because they're learning something new, right? They're trying something new for the first time too. So realizing that we're all learners and teachers, I think is also key. How much contribution each student makes to OER? That's a great question, and some more how to create OER. So I went headfirst into this, and I would not recommend that because thankfully, I was an editor in a previous life, so I was able to edit a textbook as where I was teaching it. Not everyone can do that. It was great and terrifying all at once. But starting with some short guides or some informational packets, I like having students write kind of like short overviews for different content. And that can be a great, easy way to have students start. Now, I use Google Docs. And the reason why I use Google Docs, it's not supported by my institution, but I use it because you can see the version history. You can see who has contributed to each document and how much. So you don't have to go on their word. You can look at who added what. And that is how they get graded. They basically, if you made the changes, and I leave the changes very broadly. Now that we've written the chapters, it's now a bunch of editing and adding and updating. In public health, there's always something new coming out. But I just look to see how much they've added. And I have them provide a little bit of rationale of why they chose to edit what they chose to edit. And that allows them to think about, well, did I do enough? Well, yeah, you rewrote the chapter on infectious diseases because now we have COVID. That's great. Or other folks who are needing to update some references or even remove some content. When you have, 5 groups of students that have continued to add content, our chapters get pretty long. And so removing content is also key. And so Google Docs has been revolutionary for me to figure that out. OER is a lot of work, but I think it is so beneficial because the course that I chose to use for my OER textbook, it would have cost students about $300. They would have had to buy 3 different textbooks because the course covers a lot of content. And instead, I don't have students buy textbooks for any of my courses. We work to either find content that's freely available or we write our own. And it's great when you can save students money. And I tell them that up front, like, this is why we're doing this. It's to save you money and to provide you access to this. So you don't have to worry about that it cost on top of your tuition. So I used the tools that I've used. I've worked with Lumen Learning. I use Google Docs and I also use Top Hat. I moved the content for students to actually read into Top Hat pages. It allows me to embed questions, which are my formative assessments. So students are told that they need to read the pages before they come to class. And I know that they read the pages or at least answered the questions before they came to class so that we can do some more active learning in class. And that's another reason why I think the OER is really great with that. Chris talks about, I found it a lot easier to do in synchronous classes than in asynchronous, still working on that. Asynchronous classes are a different sort of beast in some ways. I teach both and I like both for different reasons. I've tended to add an optional synchronous component in some of my asynchronous courses for students who want some more of that connection. And if you want to learn more about that, bicronous teaching is a term that you should definitely look into. I did a podcast on that for Teaching. it allows you to not say it's all asynchronous or all synchronous, but I think this is more of a spectrum, and you can morph your classes as long as it's optional, right? You can't say it's an asynchronous class and then force students to come to a synchronous discussion. But again, options are key. Oh, I love preliminary journal assignments to share their thoughts and goals. Yeah, and I think you could even make that something that's required and have them talk about why learning objectives are key. Yeah, wikis are a great way to help them, really build some of those writing skills. Depending, learning management systems sometimes have those built in. If not, I love Google Docs for many reasons. So, oh, I like Leslie, very cool. Having students make nameplates and pronouns, that is perfect. I work to memorize all of my students' names by the middle of the semester. And so this is a great way to do that. That's awesome. How do you credit students for their contributions? Students all have their name in the chapter, and it's 5% of their grade, so it's 50 points out of 1,000. So it's actually a pretty small contribution to their overall grade in my course. The first group who wrote the chapters actually got 10% of their grade, but again, pretty small contribution to this. Okay, great. Oh, optional, yeah, optional synchronous classes are good, great. Oh, online flex it. I've never heard that term before, so I like that, Sophia. Thank you for adding that. Oh, you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your questions today. If you're interested in talking more about any of this, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to jump on a call and talk to you about, what might work, what I've learned. I could tell you all the stuff that didn't work for me, but might work for you. I think part of being open and part of being in education is sharing. So thanks for being part of this and sharing what you have learned. And I look forward to hopefully speaking with some of you again soon in the future. Have a great day, everyone.